So I'm delighted to be joined today by Tom and Nadine from Passion Lab. Welcome to the UK AI podcast about business. So I wonder if I get you to just quickly introduce yourselves first, and then I'll get you to tell me more about the Passion Lab. So Nadine, maybe you could introduce yourself first.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Tim. I'm Nadine. I'm the Chief Scientific Officer at the Passion Lab, and I've been doing machine learning now for over 10 years. I got a PhD in applied mathematics, and I was working back then on machine learning for music understanding. And since then, I've been working with machine learning to solve many different problems in many different sectors and industries.
Amazing. And Tom, perhaps you could tell us about yourself and then also tell us a bit of the story about Passion Lab and what it does.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for this, Tim. So yes, I'm Tom. I'm the CEO of the Passion Lab. We're essentially an AI research and development lab based in London. Yeah, I spent the last 3 years running a machine learning consultancy and research lab for a VC. We were working largely with kind of enterprise clients, and about middle of last year decided to spin off and launch my own outfit. And in a very short space of time, with the wind behind us, you know, with what's being said about and read about about AI, we've had some really good traction. And our kind of essential mission is to help people kind of unlock their potential and ultimately kind of passion for business with AI. And we've been working with a whole range of different clients, from largely a lot in the creative industries, so from creative agencies, marketing agencies, through to record labels, which we'll come on to, and fashion brands, through to structural engineering firms. We actually recently designed a very interesting, very novel architecture, being able to convert and automate the process of converting 2D architectural drawings into 3D structural form designs. A very hard problem that essentially hadn't been largely solved, and designed an architecture to solve that. And then through to more straightforward, not straightforward, but multi-agent systems and things like that, leveraging, you know, what's happening in now the generative space. But we like to push the state of the art. I suppose really where we are, our kind of key piece of differentiation is not only are we applied problem solvers, we invariably love, you know, from an R&D perspective, we love solving problems that haven't necessarily been solved either using an off-the-shelf tool, or you can't just, you know, plug into, you know, OpenAI's API and put a wrapper around something. And invariably it's around, again, really advancing the state of the art and finding novel solutions and building proprietary systems from scratch. But yeah, as I alluded to, we've done increasingly amount of work, partly by design, but also simply by demand, into the creative industries, and more recently a lot within the kind of music and entertainment and media space, and a space that Nadine knows a lot about.
Yeah, let me just dig into systems and tools a little bit more though. I want to understand where you fit in that whole sort of system, if you like, because many organizations will be struggling with how they adopt AI and how they're running the transformation process to become an AI first organization. And you see organizations thinking about it from the leadership level right through to the very technical level, and sort of everything in between. So can you help me understand where you fit in that? Are you sort of operating at that sort of organizational or technical level? And what does sort of research and development mean within the context?
It's a great question. So, I mean, really, part of probably I missed out there is you know, but beyond just being a research and development lab, first we're an advisory and audit lab. You know, we help businesses or consultancies. We help businesses audit their internal capability, audit their workflows, understand what specific either you know available use cases there are for AI, give them ideas that they may not necessarily have thought about, audit their sort of data readiness, and understand where the data sits, and therefore either make a suggestion of existing tools or how to adapt them, or, as I say, develop and research and develop into a whole proprietary system for them to solve, again, a problem. And that is definitely what's led us down the route of what we've done thus far. I gave the example of the structural engineering firm, but we we exist to help people adopt this extraordinary technology, and that has taken so many different shapes and forms. There has obviously been a lot of energy and excitement around the power of these large language models, sure, but what these large language models have also done is help improve the whole machine learning landscape. And there are definitely a kind of approaches, new methodologies, particularly in areas like reinforcement learning, that we're leaning into as well. Beyond other areas of recommendation systems, semantic search mechanisms, those sort of things that we're being able to again being asked to do a lot more of more recently. And yeah, it's, as I say, it's taken us in lots of different directions. We don't have a specific sector that we lean into entirely, although, as I say, creative industries has definitely been one that we've been focusing on more recently. But really we're looking at kind of seeing what correlations lie within the kind of different problems we're trying to solve, and different approaches, machine learning approaches, definitely seem to be cropping up at different points.
Amazing. So we'll come back to actually what's coming up in the future and sort of some of those sort of cutting edge projects you're working on in a minute. But just for the creative sector, I know, Nadine, you've got a background in the creative industries as well. So I wanted to find out a bit more about what have you been doing in that sort of music and creative industries at the moment, and where does technology fit into the creative sectors?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of applications. I mean, a lot of people we're now talking about LLMs, and we usually use them in the context of text or in generating image and music and video. But actually, there's a lot of machine learning around understanding content, searching for it, and surfacing it. And so, for example, we had a very interesting project recently where we use machine learning to for a record label to actually go on social media channels and try and understand which music is used and is trending on social media channels, because many times nowadays it appears on TikTok before it appears on Spotify, right? And to surface artists, and there were certain constraints, and it was around detecting emerging trends on those platforms before they're already so big that everybody knows about them. So that is an interesting application. Then there's still searching in large volumes of music is still not a trivial thing. We're still used to having some genre categories that we click through, and it takes us forever to find what we're looking for. And there are already technical advances that can make this a lot easier, for example, by providing an example or by describing the music you like to have. And the same, of course, applies to image and video. So this whole semantic search in this domain is, for example, also a super interesting application. And then maybe a bit further moving away from the creative side, but microphones can also be sensors. So sound is a very interesting topic to study, because you can, for example, use it to surveil areas where you don't have a lot of lighting, where you can't hang a camera, or to understand if a motor of an engine is working correctly or machine is working correctly. So in this whole kind of sector of media and the broader space, there's a lot of work to be done. And last thing Tom touched on earlier is recommendation, which I think is, since TikTok, this was the first time the world started to know about recommendation engines, but we all know it from social media and from all media that we're consuming, that somehow it magically seems to understand what it is that you want to look at. And this can be transferred to many other things, right? The same can apply to, for example, to websites. If I know what the user has previously consumed and what the user is interested, I can use that information to bring new content to the user that the user is going to engage with, and I can make a better experience for both the user and boost engagement on a platform. So these are like some ideas of this broader sector that are very interesting.
Yeah, thank you. It's fascinating to hear how you're using the technologies in those different ways as well to really bring in new solutions for some of those problems. And Tom, did you have anything to add there in terms of the creative sector and how you're sort of really getting into that space?
I think we're seeing, as we are in a number of different industries and sectors, a kind of value proposition shift very much underneath people's feet. And so we're invariably one of the areas that, over the last 5-10 years, there's been a lot of energy and investment from an AI standpoint, and a broader kind of, the broader tech landscape and SaaS landscape into the likes of, fintech and ed tech and health tech, but less so within the creative industries. So we have been, as I say, more than anything, just by demand, creative agencies, marketing agencies that are seeing their kind of, with the, as I say, advent of these large language models in particular, their kind of value proposition shift. One, we want to find ways that we can very much, A, future-proof them, but B, very much, the adage of trying to really make sure we augment their creativity using these tools very much, rather than just replacing it. And we were involved in the House of Lords debate on Tuesday around the report stage and the amendments to the data use and access bill. And we're very much, as I said, and we've come out, in the past, on the side of creators. We do agree that there needs to be safeguards put in place. But there are ultimately still limitations to the wider understanding of how these LLMs work and the transparency of these data, and there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. But we want to be very much at the forefront of that innovation and help push the debate forward.
Yeah, thank you. And it was great to have your support there on this campaign as well, in terms of trying to find the solutions that brings the two industries together, when really we shouldn't be distinct industries, right? There's just kind of one industry which is trying to be great, creative and innovative. Happens some of those solutions are in music, some of them are in creative sectors, some of them in just pure technology. Before, you were talking a little bit about going beyond LLMs, beyond GenAI tools as well, and I think particularly in the creative sector. Nadine, was this an area that you've been sort of researching, how we go beyond LLMs or this in a way?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've now, over the last few years, all learned how useful LLMs can be with everyday tasks. And I use LLMs every day to help me with several office duties that otherwise took a lot longer. But I think in the creative industry, but generally in the industry, there are a lot of tasks that LLMs either cannot solve just because they're not designed to solve them. So if you think about you receiving your Amazon Prime order the same day, there's a lot of machine learning involved in that. But an LLM is probably not very good at creating a logistics plan for all of London. And in other cases, LLMs could solve the problem, but they're a bit too slow and too expensive still to do it. So if you think about an email spam filter, which has existed for a very long time, you could ask an LLM, is this email spam? And it would tell you yes or no, and it would be pretty good at it. But if you have to process millions of emails in seconds, an LLM is very expensive and very slow at doing that. So sometimes what we do is we use LLMs to generate data synthetically and then train deep learning models or reinforcement learning models using that data, which is a very interesting field, synthetic data generation. And then in many other applications, in our experience, when we have more complex problems, LLMs are like one cog in a bigger system. So they may take over the solution of a very small subproblem, where beforehand we would have had to train a classifier, so it makes our lives a lot easier. But many complex solutions are usually an interaction of one or more LLMs with other methods from other fields, and they're very good at solving a certain type of subproblem that is very similar to the kind of tasks that we are tasked with as humans, right? Processing text, extracting information, rewriting something, summarizing something, and so on.
I think that's a really important point that you're helping us to understand here, which is within the term AI, it's come to mean everything, right? And we were talking a little bit before in the pre-chat about how you before you'd have machine learning companies and data science companies, and now they're also labeled as AI. Part of the problem now is that when you do go into an organization and they have a mission and they say, right, we need to be an AI first company, they don't really understand what they mean by that. And it's just going to let that top down need to be competitive and have that AI label in there, not really thinking about it. And they immediately will think about needing to use an LLM. But as you've really nicely put it, actually that might not be the right tool for that particular problem. And part of what we need to do as an industry, and it sounds like you're already well into this, is help to educate those organizations on what is the right component part or the modular part of the specific tool that they can use for that problem, rather than just rushing to an LLM, which is actually only a very small part of it. It can be useful for the parts you've highlighted. I wonder then, though, what you make of agentic, because the promise of agentic is creating these agents that can effectively take over responsibility for a lot of what we've been talking about, right? It can use an LLM when it needs it. It can use the data science. It can use the machine learning to create some synthetic data over here. We give it that objective, and then it goes off and to build something. Do you think that's going to help organizations get up to speed quicker, or will we face the same challenges?
I do think agentic is super interesting, but again, it's not necessarily a new idea that comes now. If you think about reinforcement learning, which is just another branch of AI or machine learning where you formulate problems in a different way, the core component of an RL system is called an agent, and the agent has different actions that it can take, and it's optimized to take the right action in the right situation. So these agents are already operating in most likely your YouTube recommendations, your TikTok recommendations. They're taking decisions in logistics problems. They're taking decisions in traffic flow problems. They're switching traffic lights. So I do think it's very promising, but again, it's just the same approach in a new context. That's how I would frame it.
I'd add to that in that, it is exciting, and we are, as I say, increasingly being asked by firms to develop kind of agentic tools, digital twins, the likes. There is, and I think there's obviously going to be a lot of money and sort of development into this space. But I would also point out that there are some limitations that fall beyond the AI landscape. Really, let's think about not only the availability of APIs and the way that these agents can actually interact with other software and websites. Then similarly, the infrastructure, data infrastructure, data lakes and things like that are in some of these very kind of old and potentially archaic systems. A lot of this needs to be brought up to speed to be able to really enhance and augment the power of these generative mechanisms. And it's not something that can just happen overnight.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, I think, this year to see how all these different tools are brought together. I know a lot of the big tech companies are now looking at how they are building agentic solutions. We've actually got one of the Google architects coming across in June to help explain what that future looks like and what they're doing. So hopefully we'll get a lot more detail on that then. Tom, in terms of what else is coming in the future, I'd be really interested to get your sense of what you think are the major trends that we're going to see in the industry this year, and the things that you're getting asked a lot by your clients.
Well, it's a good question. I mean, there's you can look at any number and it all seems to generally be doing that. It seems to all be generally going up. We've seen, adoption rates like no other general purpose technology before, and as a result, penetration levels somewhat driven by the recent general GPTs, general purpose technologies that have gone before, whether it's mobile, internet and the likes, and it's laid the foundations for what AI has been able to do in such a short space of time. But as we know, it learns on itself, it compounds on itself. So it's something that is obviously growing exponentially. I think the kind of core numbers that speak out to me are, firstly at a kind of an early stage level. This is, we're talking about humans here. Okay, we have never really seen a tool and technology being used for kids and children at such an early age. So I think the numbers at the moment, according to gov.uk and Edexcel and UCAS, etc., is that about 80% of children are using these large language models to help with their homework and exams. Well, I suspect it's much higher than that. But, we're seeing, again, very early adoption from an age perspective, which means, kids are learning to prompt engineer very, very well from a very early age, which is going to really lay the foundations, as I say, for future development. Alongside that, we're also seeing this emerging trend of vibe creation. We're seeing that actually 35% of recent kind of AI use cases are being developed by non-technical people. These are people that haven't traditionally been precluded from this space because of their lack of ability to code. But the likes of Cursor and Lovable and these other systems that have allowed people to enter into a previously highly technical space. That's, I think, interesting. And then ultimately, with just this race for adoption from a corporate level. We're seeing that 98% of Fortune 500 businesses have implemented AI at some point or another, or at some stage or another in their business. There is still a major gap between a lot of people, businesses talking about implementing it and actually having a clear strategy in place. I mean, we're definitely seeing that as an opportunity, but also a risk. You know, we're seeing it. Obviously, we're helping businesses, you know, refine and define their AI strategy, audit their processes, and then through that come back with a roadmap and a list of recommendations of different, you know, suggestions and tools that they could implement. But there is also, and we're seeing already an unraveling with some businesses who in the last 2 years have jumped straight on the bandwagon, have brought in on board a whole bunch of, you know, off-the-shelf AI tools into their processes, where in the past they would have had very strict procurement policies as to which tools should be implemented or not. Some of these systems are less ethical, less transparent, you know, have fairly blurred terms and conditions as to what they do with their data, with your data, and they're being implemented very quickly into businesses. And then they're going, well, hold on, there's an overlap of functionality. There's a misunderstanding of where this data sits and who's got access to it. And as a result, we're being asked on occasion to now try and unravel that and try and understand actually what is the most appropriate route forward. So I think that's also something for businesses to be mindful of, you know, not just go after the next glossy thing, but really make sure we look at the fine print. Funny enough, Nadine, I mean, we were discussing this more recently, you know, about the kind of emerging technical trends. You know, I think one of the things that again is often overlooked is the fast power and energy use of these data centers and these large language models. You know, I mean, if the numbers are anything to go by 2030, data centers will be consuming 1,000 terawatts of energy, you know, per annum, which you know, for comparison, the UK last year consumed just 200. So it's a huge, you know, major shift that's happening, you know, and I think there needs to be a lot of work from a development standpoint. And I know the research community is looking at this as to how to improve the efficiency of large language models and the wider kind of AI space.
Amazing. Yeah, I want to come to both of you for a closing thought that kind of just wraps up, I think, what advice you would give to people who are listening to this about how to keep up with some of these trends in particular. You know, because this is what you guys do. You're constantly sort of researching and developing new ideas. One of the challenges that businesses we speak to often is that they feel overwhelmed. There's so much here that's changing all the time, and they get up to speed. And like you were saying, they build in this new tool into their tech stack, and immediately it's not the latest thing. They have to then try and build a new thing in. So I wanted to come to you to sort of get some advice on, you know, how businesses should be trying to keep up with this and ensure they're not left behind. Maybe if I come to Nadine first, and then I'll come to Tom as well, but just your closing thoughts there.
Yeah, I think what you just mentioned is a problem that, I mean, I will be honest here, I also have. I have people telling me, have you seen that new AI LLM app? And I go like, no, and they go, well, you work in that space, how can you not know it? Yeah. I think the main challenge here is to filter through the noise and to also take this, because ML has been there for many, many years, just a bit behind the scenes. And now it's at our fingertips and everybody can actively engage with it. So I think my advice would be to take this as an occasion to try and understand AI beyond those tools that we're being bombarded with all the time. Many of them are super useful. And yes, it takes some time to figure out, and some of them will live and others will disappear again, which are useful. But rather than jumping on every new tool that you get suggested on your social media feed and you need to try it, is more from a business perspective, making the effort of understanding AI as a whole and what it can do beyond just those tools that you can just download and try, right? And that's a very difficult task, but I think it's an important task, and I think now it's the right occasion.
Brilliant. Yeah, I love that. The mindset shift of being able to test and learn, and being quite humble about knowing that you can't be the expert in everything, but willing to get stuck in and make a few mistakes and learn from them. I think that's really good advice. And Tom, what would be your advice you'd give to businesses who are struggling to keep up or trying to keep up?
Well, there is a major shift happening like we've never experienced and seen underneath our feet right now. And so don't be afraid, beyond just the experimentation piece, as this sort of eruption, this explosion in this technology happens, don't be afraid to actively upskill oneself from a formative perspective. Really, like, go back. There are some fantastic courses online on Coursera and the likes. Also, all the big kind of larger tech houses, Microsoft, Google, etc., all have very, very good academies, free resources that you can, learn not only how these, a little bit about the wider machine learning space, then more specifically around deep learning or reinforcement learning. But also what I like to do, which Nadine touched on, is the historical context to how we got here. It is not something that has happened overnight. A lot of people think that, oh my God, Sam Altman came along in 2017, 2018, and here we are. Machine learning has been a hard slog over 70 plus years, back from Alan Turing right through various different AI summers and AI winters, investment data, all sorts of different things happening at different stages. And it's only really been in the last few years that, with a combination of obviously compute and processing power combined with the access and abundance of data, that we've been able to do what was actually written and written about in the 80s and 90s. So these are just it's about understanding the space more widely. This is going to impact everyone. So take that time to learn just a little bit more and go beyond just the surface of using these, as I say, these generative tools.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. That's really helpful for, I think, everybody listening to this to understand so much about what's happening in the cutting edge there. You've kind of brought to life some of these ways in which you're doing it. But also, it's not just about finding the technology, it's about finding the solution. So different challenges will have different solutions. You've helped us understand that. And I think it's really important to also just kind of highlight what you've been saying around being humble around all of this and being able to learn, approaching it that way as well. Some really great advice there. And how can we stay in touch and find out more about the Passion Lab?
Well, our website is passionlab.ai, and we are very active on LinkedIn, and I'd love to connect with anyone who's keen to understand a bit more or has got a problem that they need solving, and we can see if we can help.
Amazing. Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Nadine. It's been really great to find out more about the Passion Lab today. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.